This is Cat the Catster, and this is a review of episode 4 of Lower Decks, season 4, Something Borrowed, Something Green. The crew goes to a planet, the Orion planet. The girls go to the Orion. Tendi and Mariner go to the Orion planet for her sister's wedding. Her sister is a Cat character. The B story is that Rutherford and Boimler are fighting over a bonsai plant, and then the creatures in the they're scanning a nebula. This creature in the nebula. This creature wants to fight the Cerritos over the rights to scan the nebula before it phase shifts. Rutherford and Tendi are on the. Rutherford and Boimler are playing Mark Twain, and at one point they mention double and doppelganger, and this is an unusual word, but yeah, doppelganger, and the fact that he's playing Mark Twain, he's playing Mark Twain is hilarious. Later on, Captain Freeman also plays Mark Twain. Yeah, I wonder if he. I think Mark Twain would approve of that gag, just because it's funny. But yeah, something borrowed, something great. The Orion Society is explored. She's a syndicate member. She's the Orion's holoprime, but that means an assassin. The sister is also a prime, so an assassin. It's something different than the other thing. But yeah. Yeah, and there's combat, and there's a murder bug poker. There's like a drinking game with a murder bug. Sort of a twist on the tequila worm thing, but instead of that, it's like a big spider. It's going to kill them. Mariner keeps getting stabbed by various people on the ship. So... On the Orion planet, the slave pheromone thing is explored. That is, some people just don't have it. Apparently, Tendi doesn't have it as much, so she brought an anti-pheromone spray. She just doesn't have it for whatever reason. Very similar to the character in another story that doesn't have the energy in the story, but overcompensates through having a very active imagination, or a very active going on. This episode has references to our stuff all over the place. Maybe not the Orion pheromone thing so much, but maybe the idea that the teen spirit idea in coming up in season 3, and which is kind of similar to the stuff with the character of Dana in the Robotech thing, who had something the aliens needed, a teen spirit kind of thing going on, same thing. But they called it the spiritia. They called it the protoculture, whatever they very similar. The inferences and lines delivered are clearly references to Starship locations, and Robotech meets the Transformers, which is really, really weird. Unless, when they were writing Lower Decks season 4, I was writing Starship destinations, and they just knew what I was going to do. So let's reference some of his stuff in here. It'll be fun. It won't have any bearing on the story. It'll just reference it. Okay, there's the Robotech, because the Robotech stuff was written, several months earlier before we filmed it. You see, the Robotech stuff. Yeah. So the story ideas were way earlier. They were rewritten into the Robotech story during both those series were written around. They were finished in October. So whenever they finished with Lower Decks season 3, they were somehow aware of things like primes, things like doppelgangers, things like a unique presence among them, attendees, very similar to the one from the Starship locations, the first season of Strange Worlds. The second season was the Fallen Ones. Third season will be Destinations. But in the first season, Tendi is serving on the Chimera A, and it's 20 years later. It's 2402 in that story. Interestingly enough, the Chimera series takes place in after the whole Picard series in 2402. But yeah, so they were also aware. So we had these doppelganger things and doubles and you could say, oh no, it was they were thinking of Picard season 3. They were thinking of something else, but the chances of this being similar are fairly astronomical, Captain. If you eliminate the improbable, if you eliminate the impossible, the improbable, however unlikely, must therefore be the truth. But yes, before pre-strike Star Trek, writer strike. So hold on. That's interesting that it's called that. Although in Transformers, a prime is a prime, and they would know about that too. You could say, okay, they knew Prime. The Primes are a central Transformers character. It's a good guy, sort of thing. The leader of the Autobots, the Primes, the 12 Primes. Carrying the Orion people around on sedan chairs also could be construed as, how they would move action figures if they had them in go motion on Chimera. They would put them on lift them or carry them around. Yeah, that too. Syndicate stuff, they're spoofing. The Syndicate stuff, they're spoofing something else. Possibly The Sopranos. Possibly a number of other earlier shows. But the Pheromone Club thing, they're spoofing a number of things with mobs in them. A little bit of Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. A little bit of old school stuff. But yes, the doppelgangers, throwaway line, are the bad guys in Transformers Robotech meets the Transformers. Not Transtech. Robotech meets the Transformers. The Sentinel stories. They're the main bad guy in there. And Dana Sterling has the unique power that they don't have, that they're looking for. The teen spirit, I guess. I don't know. But in the Chimera version coming up, it's the character of Tam and Kestra Riker. Tam Locarno and Kestra Riker have that power too. So if you're looking for that, the bad guys in that story are looking for them. For that reason. So yeah, and they're adults now. It's 2404 in that series. So yeah, well, they're almost adults. They're going off to the academy. The overarching story of that. That would be roughly 20 years after this season of Lower Decks, which is set in 2384. So before the thing, they're setting up the story of this ship in Lower Decks. It's going around shooting things, blowing them up. They're kind of implying that the Romulans aren't behind it, but the Romulans were behind the Mars attack that happens a year later. They were. Indian characters. Also, there was a Lore Reloaded sort of. I think it was Lore Reloaded. I'd be wrong on that. I think it was on Mariner. This is the episode. Let's go on to the episode first. The episode was fine. It was fun. You get to see Orion culture, and then Talen. Tendi doesn't want Talen to talk about everything, so they just took pictures and told him about it afterward. As I gossip, Talen throws the thing out the window. The Orion ship that is in the shipyard looks like the Chimera. That's interesting. Oh, yeah, it does. There's the Chimera up there. Oh, you can't see it, but does that Orion pirate ship in the episode not look like that? Right there. Kind of does. So yeah. So let's yeah. So let's yeah. So let's not only reference that, but somehow this earlier ship from 20 years earlier looks like the Chimera A. Well, maybe the explanation for that is the Chimera A has Orion technology. They used some of it that design. That's probably what's going on. They know. You see, the show was set earlier. So yeah. So there's a cameo by the ship, the Chimera A, in the episode. There's the doppelgangers from the Robotech, the Transformers. Yeah, Robotech meets Transformers. There's a Prime. Lots of Prime is mentioned because they love Transformers over there and they love Robotech. So yeah. So those are some nods and something borrowed, something green. It usually end a comedy with a wedding, but in this case they do the comedy with it. They do the jokes really well on this one, and they did them well on Prodigy, but not so much on those short treks. I wonder if there's another short trek that I have to watch now. But yeah, a lot of references to the Calicat season on Lower Decks. So look for them. I will point them out, of course. But yes, we had to be, not to be in the know and go like, okay, yeah, you can totally reference that. Yeah, we're okay with that. You could even reference Cillians if you really wanted to. You could have like, Picard season 3 did. The villain is a Cillian shapeshifter. She is a Cillian. She could even have been one of the Glennas easily, or one of their friends. Probably one of their friends. It's probably. Yeah, and but there's Roller and really dead in that shuttle accident. I don't know. But anyway, the Lore Reloaded thing. All right, so even though the actors that are doing the voices on Lower Decks are in their 30s, late 20s, early 30s, they're mostly in their early 30s. Tommy Houston's in her early 30s. When they plays Mariner. She's in her mid 30s. She's almost 40, I think. But yeah, so somewhere around that. She's playing a character that's younger than she actually is, which is customary in some sort of. Tara Strong played a child several times over, and she was like an adult. The actor played Inspector Gadget, Penny, But yeah, and then went on to play in Codename Kids Next Door, like in her 30s, playing a kid. So yeah, it's no precedent. The characters in Lower Decks are supposed to be in their early 20s because they wouldn't be ensigns and they wouldn't be younger if they weren't. So the characters, not the voice actors. Now I know there's some confusion because they never figured out the ages of the Voyager cast. They just assumed the actors were. So the Voyager show, they didn't ever figure that out. We just don't know how old Janeway and Chakotay and Tuvok and everybody. We know how old Tuvok is, actually. We do know how old he is. He's 100 and something during the run of the show. They reference it. He's about 100. He's about 100, yeah. He has a century point birthday at one point. He's 100. Everyone else we don't know. So so he was 28 in the time of Kirk and Sulu and all that from Star Trek 6. And then about 80 years later, he's in Voyager. So he would have to be over 100 when that Voyager episode aired. Just about 100. But yeah, Mariner is the Lore Reloaded thing was trying to figure out how old she was and trying to figure out, was she in the Battle of Wolf 359 or was she in the Dominion War or whatever? And was she a child on the Enterprise D or something? What was going on? Well, first of all, the Battle of the show takes place 20 years ago. The show. So if you put the show in context, Lower Decks takes place about 20 years ago, in 2384. It would technically be now 2400, but they screwed up the star dates when they released the Picard show. They screwed up Picard's son's birth date as well, because he'd be like 19 or 20, and he's clearly played by an actor who's almost 40. Also, the new Kirk on Starship Strange New Worlds, on Star Trek Strange New Worlds, is over 40. So yeah, they're all playing old, younger people. Kirk was supposed to be 34 when the cage happened. Not the end of that cage. Where No One's Gone Before. Because we know the ages of the original OG cast. We know how old they were. But, so, vis-a-vis my little rant here. Beckett Mariner and Boimler and especially Beckett Mariner is 23 when the show starts. That's established. The actress actually said the character's 23. The backstory says she's 23. That establishes her age in 2380. It's 23. And she's a little older now. It's been 4 seasons, so she's closer to 26, 27, somewhere around there. but yeah, and Boimler is 24. He's a little older, just a little. 24, 20, probably 24, because they said he was older by that 1 year. And yeah, so we don't know how old Freeman is, but presumably she's got to be older than 50. She's probably about 50, I would guess. Now, Freeman could have been at the Battle of Wolf 359, but probably not. They didn't really reference that in there. Mariner, but vis-a-vis, the point is Mariner could not have been at the Battle of Wolf 359 as a child. Because she would have been a child. Go back 17 years to the Battle of Wolf 359 in that timeline. And she would have been 9 years old. So there's no way that she would have been at the Battle of Wolf 359. The only way that works is when the Enterprise D is she was a child on the Enterprise D, which is possible. And that when she was a child, because they had kids back then on the ship. But it would be a little weird for the Enterprise D to keep the families on the ship when it went to fight the Borg. But they didn't really have time to drop them off. So Worf had the saucer section briefly and whatever. LaForge, I think it was, yeah. and other stuff. Worf and LaForge. Yeah. They didn't really do much with the saucer. They brought it back. So she could have been, it's possible, a child in the Enterprise D, which would make her roughly the same age as Jeremy Astor from The Next Generation. But yes, and Alexander, she would be at that point. Yeah, Alexander. No, Alexander would be younger. They screwed up his age too. When they introduced him, he was already 4. He should have been 2. And they said that was a big discussion at a convention that I started with Herb Justman and the other Rob Justman and the others about the how can Alexander have aged up to 10 or 11 by the time he's on Deep Space Nine? Klingon this Klingon actor without a beat shot up and said, we're holding a kid. He was like, Klingon children age quickly, which was very funny. But yes, no, there's no explanation for Alexander's age. And him being 15 when he was like a weapons officer on a Klingon ship in Deep Space Nine really makes no sense either. But he was closer to 11 actually, because Deep Space Nine was concurrent with TNG and Voyager as well. So in order for that to work, it doesn't. He was 11. He was 11 Terran years old, Alexander, when he was on that ship. She roughly matches up with Jeremy Astor, who was older. By the 2400s, Jeremy Astor would be a crewman on the Chimera A, and a lieutenant presumably. And yeah, he would be about her Tommy Newson's age. He would be the right age to be not Tendi but Mariner's age. He's Mariner's age. So yeah, they're all in their 40s, and that's cool. It would be now. But yeah, clearly and when you see the characters pop up in that Strange New Worlds crossover, it looks like they're the right age. They're playing younger. They're playing to their younger selves, even though they're in their late 30s, early 40s. But they're playing late 20s and early 30s, playing 10 years younger. But yeah, she wouldn't have been at that. Now, what she could have been at was as a cadet, but she would have been a young cadet. Mariner could have been at the Dominion War, but she would have practically been in training. She would have been roughly at that point the same age as Nog, and she would have been in training. So yeah, that kind of doesn't work. Yeah. The Orion girl, though, they kind of established her age a little bit in the story as early 20s as well, mid 20s. So Tendi in this episode is in her mid 20s as well. Possibly around 26 when the story started, and now 4 years later, 30. She's a little older than they are, just a little bit. So she's older than they are, which is consistent with the Tendi from the other show that's in her 50s. Tendi will go on to become the science officer, what a science officer slash a doctor helper person, science officer basically, on the Chimera A. So yeah, in that universe anyway, it's multiverse, so it's fine. Also, it was funny to see the multiple Mark Twain doppelgangers, and which is not something we entirely thought of. I mean, that story is from the doppelgangers is actually T.L. Ahrens, and I don't know him, but he wrote that story over 15 years ago. So the Testament. It's weird that there are elements of Testament in this episode, including a mob and a group that wants to have them, and a kidnapping, and that's a plot of the Testament story. But instead of it being the Dana character, in his original story, it wasn't Dana. It was like Daniel Witwicky's kid. But in the revised version, it wasn't Daniel Witwicky. It was a Sterling one, because that made more sense because it's Robotech. But in the original version, it was it fits in with the sister thing. It fits in with the sister. There was a sister there, Dana and Aurora. If Aurora had a wedding scene, it would be the same thing, but they didn't. So it was different enough that they could say, okay, this syndicate thing and the bad guy and their motivations are silly, of course. It's also similar to an upcoming Cillian episode dealing with the mob planet, which is coming up. Silly. So the script right there, it's based on the Tarantino premise. Because he's never going to get to do a Star Trek, so I adapted his idea as an episode for Destinations. It should be fun. We'll see. So that is my review of a roundabout way of rambling on about other stuff. But my review of trying drastically to find connections where there may be very tenuous, weak connections between Starship locations and lower decks, as if somehow I was not in the writer's room, but somehow they knew. If I was, it would be SAG-AFTRA, and then I couldn't do any because it's a strike. They'd be like, wait a minute. I'm not getting paid to find parallels in some of our stuff with their stuff. I mean, it's science fiction. You're going to find stuff that are parallel. You can just assume. Anyway.